And remember that Chapel Hill conference that's thrown in 1957 by Agnew Bainson, who's obsessed with anti-gravity? Well, Lewis Witten was there, and the conference helped establish quantum gravity, of which string theory is an offshoot. In an interview with the American Institute of Physics, when anti-gravity gets brought up, Lewis Witten says, a guy named Townsend discovered that there was a type of bismuth that was repelled instead of attracting.
There was a vice president of the Martin Company who brought that up. He said, I read about a guy in Indiana who says the rock of bismuth that shows anti-gravity.
And where have we heard about bismuth with possible anti-gravity properties before? That's Gary Nolan, Stanford microbiologist and Nobel nominee, who claims to have UFO crash parts with isotope ratios that don't occur naturally on Earth. One of his pieces that we looked at together when I visited was magnesium bismuth.
Bismuth layers less than a human hair, supposedly picked up in the crash retrieval of an advanced aerospace vehicle. Nowhere could we find any evidence that anybody ever made one of these.
And who's this Townsend guy Witten's referring to? Witten had to have been talking about Townsend Brown, one of the country's leading anti-gravity researchers at the time. Yeah, and there's a guy named Townsend Brown who had a theory that if you took two charged plates and then you put something neutral between them, the neutral thing would sort of gravitate a little towards the positively charged plate, and you could basically figure out anti-gravity. From the outside, Townsend Brown sort of looks like an amateurish mid-century physicist and failed inventor exploring the kooky world of anti-gravity just to end up failing and creating the intellectual property behind the Ionic Breeze air purifier. I'm not joking. But a great biography called The Man Who Mastered Gravity by Paul Schotzkin tells the real story. He parachuted behind enemy lines into Germany in 1944 and started looking into the German UFO reverse engineering program.
That's crazy.
OSS and MI6 super spies Bill Donovan and William Stevenson needed the Allies' preeminent anti-gravity scientists to investigate the notorious Foo Fighter phenomena. These were bizarre orbs that looked like intelligently controlled ball lightning popping up all over Germany in the early 40s and messing with Allied fighter pilots. I couldn't find a ton of corroboration outside of Schotzkin's book on this story, but here's why I think it's true. We do know for a fact that Eisenhower sent General James Doolittle to investigate Swedish ghost rockets. These were tons of UFO sightings in Sweden and Finland in the immediate aftermath of World War II. Curiously, Doolittle then went back to the United States just to found the Lindbergh Foundation, which researched novel aviation propulsion methods. So I wouldn't be totally surprised if Townsend Brown was tasked with the same thing with Foo Fighters.
I mean, there's some other stuff too that I can't talk about that was way before that you're like, oh shit.
But what did Brown's work in anti-gravity have to do with UFOs? Well, his gravitator looked exactly like a flying saucer.
He found that circular craft were better for that application than winged craft.
And behind closed doors, Townsend Brown was obsessed with UFOs. He even created NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. When Townsend's daughter, Linda Brown, and his biographer requested the scientist's records from the Navy, they were at first very uncooperative, and then eventually they hinted that a lot of Brown's work was still classified. But why would Brown's work be classified if he was just a failed hack?
The National Secrecy Act prevented scientists like T. Townsend Brown from commercializing or even publicizing any technology which could potentially be interpreted as having a military application.
Well, we know from Schotzkin's biography that Brown actually had meetings with the highest level officials in American atomic programs. People like Edward Teller, the father of the hydrogen bomb, and General Curtis LeMay, both deep insiders when it came to atomic secrets. Townsend Brown's daughter Linda even recalls that he was often taken home in a black Cadillac, driven by a man that she would eventually come to know as Robert Sarbacher. And where have we heard that mysterious name before?
Sarbacher, somebody purportedly involved in the stand-up of the stuff that I uncovered, right?
But if you look deeper, things get even weirder with Brown. In the naval records that we do have, it shows that Brown was suddenly terminated by the Navy in 1942 with no explanation, despite strong performance. 2 weeks later, he mysteriously pops up as an employee at Martin Corporation in Burbank, just 50 miles from where Skunk Works is founded a year later by legendary aeronautical engineer Kelly Johnson. Skunk Works was created to house Martin's most advanced secretive work. Over 80% of its current projects are still classified. Is it a coincidence that Townsend Brown joined Martin Corporation a year before its founding? And guess who else funded Brown? None other than Agnew Bainson, the same anti-gravity financier who helped send physics into a dead end by popularizing quantum gravity.
Okay, Townsend Brown. Remember that. I wanted to look that up. I've heard of him in one of the documentaries, I believe.
Because there was this golden age of relativity in the 50s, and then everything sort of went silent. And I think that's an interesting axis for you guys to look into. Okay, this is all interesting, but I know, right? We don't have a smoking gun that any of Brown's work actually got implemented by Deep Black Aerospace. Well, that's actually not true. We kind of do have evidence. In March of 1992, Aviation Week broke a story about the B-2 stealth bomber. It used an electrokinetic effect in its wings, producing a Byfield Brown effect. The B-2 surfs its own electrostatic wave, the negative cloud chasing the positive wing. This is an exact description of Townsend Brown's work, and the Byfield Brown effect is literally named after him. And the B-2 was built by the merged Northrop Grumman, whose major investor, Floyd Odlum, was the same guy that invested in Townsend Brown's company, Guidance Technologies, in the 60s. I guess Townsend Brown isn't just the wacky fan guy anymore.